Thank you for the lovely introduction. Hello everyone, my name is Bijal Patel and today myself along with my colleague Nnenna and Nzelibe will be presenting on Division of Filing Review related helpful tips for abbreviated new drug applications, same as ANDA submission and control correspondences submission. So to provide you with an overview for this discussion, first I'll review some tips related to commonly encountered major and minor deficiencies as it relates to ANDA submission, and after that Nnenna will review tips related to control correspondences submission. Alright, so let's first review the refuse to receive data for past 3 fiscal years. So in fiscal year 2018, 1,057 ANDAs were submitted, of which 88 ANDAs were refused. In fiscal year 2019, total 923 ANDAs were submitted, of which 47 ANDAs were refused. And in fiscal year 2020, 865 ANDAs were submitted, of which 40 ANDAs were refused. As you can see, in past 3 fiscal years, the number of RTRs have gone down, which shows that the applicants and the agency are collaborating well and the quality of applications being submitted are improving each year. So before I start reviewing tips related to the major deficiencies, let's look at the most commonly encountered major deficiencies in fiscal year 2020. So stability data related issues, the proposed drug product not being qualitatively and or quantitatively same to the reference listed drug, inadequate dissolution data, inadequate justification for drug substance and or drug product impurities, incomplete or failed bioequivalence studies, and inadequate justification of excipient in the proposed drug product formulation were some of the most common reasons for RTR. So in the next few slides, I'll review tips related to the commonly encountered major deficiencies that I just highlighted in the previous slide. To avoid stability data related major deficiency, applicants should provide a minimum of 3 test batches that are manufactured using at least 2 API lots per each proposed strength. Let's say, for example, if the ANDA is proposing 50 mg and 100 mg strength, for each strength that is for 50 mg, at least 3 batches should be manufactured using at least 2 API lots, and same recommendations would apply to 100 mg strength. For accelerated and long-term studies, these studies should be submitted for minimum of 3 batches per strength and should include 6 months, meaning at least 180 days worth of data with at least 3 time points. That is, for example, 0, 3, and 6 months. So ensure that the studies for all batches meet the 180 days and 3 time points recommendation. Let's say if the accelerated studies show significant change or failure of any attribute. In this case, intermediate studies should be submitted for all 3 batches of that specific strength along with the failed accelerated study data and failure analysis. As far as liquid dosage form, oral solution, suspension, and semi-solid goes, provide studies on both worst case and non-worst case orientation. Also, ensure that all stability start dates and pull dates are provided and make sure that they are accurate. Okay, so let's talk about the next common major deficiency related tips. So Division of Filing Review conducts Q1, Q2 evaluation on parenterals, otic, and ophthalmic dosage forms. These dosage forms generally must be Q1, Q2 same to RLD pursuant to 21 CFR 314.94A9, Romanet 3 and 4. Applicants must provide justification for any changes to the exception excipients in your proposed drug formulation. Also, applicants may submit a controlled correspondence to request Q1, Q2 evaluation of your proposed drug formulation prior to submitting an ANDA. Alright, next let's review tips related to dissolution issues. So applicants should follow product-specific guidance recommended dissolution studies. When applicable, applicants should provide half-tablet dissolution study data for modified release drug products. Also, comparative dissolution studies should be conducted on at least 12 dosage units of each strength of the proposed test product and reference listed drug product. Next, let's review some tips with respect to providing adequate justification for drug substance impurities as well as drug product degradation products. So as per the guidance for industry on ANDAs, impurities in drug substance, and guidance for industries ANDAs on impurities in drug product. For specified identified impurity or degradation product, the proposed acceptance criteria, which is AC, should not exceed regulatory qualification threshold, which is QT. For specified unidentified impurities or degradation product, the proposed AC should not exceed identification threshold, same as IT. Justification should be provided if AC exceeds QT or IT. And here are some of the examples of data that can be used as justification are if the proposed level or the observed level do not exceed levels observed in RLD. The degradation product is significant metabolite of the drug substance. Another example would be if the observed level and proposed AC for the degradation product are adequately justified by scientific literature or adequately evaluated in toxicology studies. Let's talk about unspecified impurities. So for unspecified impurities, the proposed AC should not exceed IT. And also here, USP cannot be cited as justification for unspecified impurities. Moving on to next two commonly encountered major deficiency. So with respect to BE studies, ensure that passing BE study data are provided in the original ANDA submission, and this data should be included in Module 2.7. The last common major deficiency related tip I would like to review is for inactive ingredient database justification for the proposed inactive ingredient level of use. So applicants can justify the inactive ingredients using IID listing. If the applicant wishes to use an inactive excipient at a level higher than justifiable by the IID, they can submit complete PharmTox information, cite a specific example of CDER approved drug product, or refer to an FDA controlled correspondence response. For oral powder for suspension, calculate milligram per dose on dry powder basis, and this calculated amount then should be justified based on an amount per unit in the IID listing that corresponds to an oral dosage form. You may refer to RTR guidance for this topic for details. For oral liquids, calculate amount per dosage unit based on RLD dosing information, and applicants should provide IID justification again on total amount per dose. Last point I would like to mention here is that all flavoring agent components should be justified. Also, provide DMF letter of authorization if needed, along with other information as applicable. Or you may provide composition breakdown of the flavoring agent. So far, we've reviewed tips related to major deficiency. Now shifting gears to tips related to minor deficiency that are commonly issued. So here, I'll highlight tips based on minors we commonly issue by each module of the ANDA submission. So in Module 1, with respect to Form FDA 356H, ensure consistency between patent certification that is checked off in Field 20 of Form 356H and information provided in Module 1352. Also, ensure that chemical name is listed in Field 11 of Form 356H. In Field 6, you should list all proposed strengths. And if your proposed drug product is an injectable, you should include fill volumes as well. For DMF numbers listed in Field 29 of Form 356H, these numbers should be consistent with information provided in Module 142 and vice versa. Also, applicants must provide environmental impact analysis statement or claim of categorical exclusion in Module 112.14. Okay, so let's talk about basis of submission. So here, ensure appropriate BOS is cited on Form FDA 356H and in Module 112.11. Designate RLD and, if applicable, RS, which is reference standard that is currently listed in the Orange Book. Please refer to the Guidance for Industry for referencing approved drug products in ANDA submission for additional information here. Also, if your proposed strength is approved via suitability petition, applicants should provide SP docket number and FDA's correspondence approving the petition. So change in strength that differs from RLD is one example when an approved SP is required. Some other examples are change in route of administration or change in dosage form, or an SP approving one different active ingredient in a fixed combination drug product. So these are another examples where an approved SP docket number and FDA's correspondence approving the petition should be included in the ANDA submission. Alright, another minor we commonly issue is with respect to comparison of the proposed drug product and the reference listed drug. Here, ensure comparison is against the reference listed drug and the information is provided in Module 1.12.12. Last few tips on Module 1 are related to Module 1.14, labeling section. Here, ensure that the draft and RLD container labels are legible. Provide the RLD container and carton label for each strength in Module 1.14.3.3. Also, provide the proposed container and carton labels for each strength and each proposed container size in Module 1.14.1.1. Lastly, in Module 1.14.3.1, annotated comparison may be made to reference standard only if the RLD labeling is not available. So, try to make all efforts to locate RLD label, and if you're unable to locate, and if the comparison is done against reference standard, this should be clearly stated. With respect to Module 2, in Module 2.3 and Module 2.7, ensure that the quality overall summary data is provided in separate PDF and Word documents. Okay, so let's look at the common minors and tips with respect to Module 3. In Module 3.2.P1, ensure that the composition table contains information on the proposed formulation in terms of percent weight per weight, weight per volume, or volume per volume as applicable. Also, for excipients that are available in different grade, purity, or hydration state, specify the grade, purity, and hydration state of the excipient that is used in your formulation. With respect to excipients that are available in different hydration state, here, if there was any water correction done for a specific excipient while manufacturing a drug product, add a footnote with this information to the composition table in 3.2.P1. Also, as I mentioned earlier, provide amount in terms of milligram per dose for oral, suspension, and solution in 3.2.P1. Also, for oral powder for suspension, provide milligram per dose on dry powder basis, which is milligram per dose prior to reconstitution. Also, as I mentioned earlier, justify the calculated amount, which is milligram per dose, of the dry powder based on an amount per unit in the IID listing that corresponds to an oral dosage form. Lastly, for Module 3.2.S45 and 3.2.P56, follow guidance recommended format for providing justification of specification tables. Also, provide each table for specified identified, specified unidentified, and unspecified impurities separately. The only point I want to mention about Module 5 is ensure adequate study tagging files are provided. Okay, so last set of tips I would like to provide would be applicable to the entire ANDA. So please ensure that English translations are provided for all documents in your ANDA submission. Also, documents in your ANDA submission should follow ECTD and PDF specifications. Ensure that the leaf titles are descriptive, there are adequate and descriptive bookmarks, and hyperlink table of contents are provided. Ensure documents are placed in correct location in your ANDA submission. And here, please refer to ANDA content and format guidance for additional information. Also, make sure there are no duplicate files in the original ANDA and or while responding to an information request. And if you have any ECTD related questions, please contact CDER ESUB at the email address provided here. So to summarize, so far I've reviewed tips related to major and minor deficiencies. I hope that these tips are helpful for your future ANDA submissions. And now my colleague Nnenna will review tips related to controlled correspondences submission. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Bijal. I'm Nnenna Nzelibe, and at this point we're going to shift gears and talk about controlled correspondences. So during the course of my presentation, I would go over the types of controlled correspondence inquiries that are handled by the Division of Filing Review. I would also share some helpful tips for the submission of controlled correspondences. And then finally, I would highlight some of the other review disciplines that review and respond to controlled correspondences. At the Division of Filing Review, we are responsible for reviewing and responding to 3 types of standard controlled correspondences. And a standard controlled correspondence is essentially a correspondence submitted to the agency by or on behalf of a generic drug manufacturer or related industry requesting information on a specific element of the generic drug product development or post-approval submission requirements. So the 3 types of standard controlled correspondences handled by the Division of Filing are Q1, Q2 evaluations, inactive ingredients evaluations, as well as filing strategy inquiries. So for Q1, Q2 evaluations, as Bijal highlighted during her presentation, drug products intended for parenteral, ophthalmic, or ODQ use generally must be Q1, Q2 same to the RLD, the reference listed drug, pursuant to 21 CFR 314.94A9, Romanet 3 through 4. So generic drug manufacturers may submit test formulations for Q1, Q2 sameness comparison against the RLD before manufacturing exhibit batches in support of an ANDA submission. So with respect to inactive ingredients evaluations, as stated in the guidance for industry on ANDA submissions, refuse to receive standards, also known as the RTR guidance, the FDA will refuse to receive an ANDA if the submission proposes to use an inactive ingredient at a level that exceeds any of the inactive ingredient database listings without the justifications outlined in the RTR guidance. So before submitting your ANDA, you can look in the inactive ingredients database for listings that justify the amounts of inactive ingredients in your proposed generic. However, if you cannot find such listings, you can petition the agency in a controlled correspondence to confirm if the level of use of inactive ingredients in your proposed generic formulations exceed amounts previously approved by the agency for use in a drug product administered via the same route as your proposed generic. And then lastly, the Division of Filing Review also handles controlled correspondence inquiries on the acceptability of various proposed filing strategies. So for instance, you may seek the agency's concurrence on the submission of multiple presentations of a drug product in a single ANDA. So the agency has published a guidance for industry on controlled correspondence related to generic drug development. And this guidance outlines information that should be provided for every controlled correspondence. However, I would like to go over some good practices to follow that are sometimes overlooked to ensure that your controlled correspondence is submitted in full with the necessary details at the time of initial submission. This way, we can provide responses to aid you with your generic development efforts in a timely fashion without having to go through multiple cycles of asking for additional information. So I'm going to be sharing 4 tips today, and the first 3 pertain specifically to Q1, Q2 assessments. So for Q1, Q2 assessments on drug products co-packaged with a diluent, we ask that you include the diluent formulation because diluents are part of the Q1, Q2 assessment. Also, we would like requesters to indicate the total fill volume for parenteral products, as the strength of a parenteral product is based on the total drug content, and separate formulation assessment requests are required for drug products with multiple strengths. On the composition table for the proposed test formulations, we would like requesters to specify any water correction for inactive ingredients that exist in multiple hydrate forms. For instance, edetate disodium EDTA exists as dihydrate and anhydrous. And then lastly, we ask that you include all applicable units of measurement for all inactive ingredients in your controlled correspondence submissions. So when controlled correspondences are submitted to the agency, they are received by a control coordinator team within the Office of Generic Drugs, OGD. These controls are then triaged to the appropriate disciplines within OGD or the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, OPQ, for review and response. So the review disciplines that review and respond to controlled correspondences include OGD's Office of Bioequivalence, OGD's Office of Research and Standards, OGD's Division of Filing Review, OGD's Division of Labeling Review, OGD's Office of Generic Drug Policy, as well as OPQ's Office of Policy for Pharmaceutical Quality. So these various review disciplines review different elements of the generic drug development process. So if a requester seeks information on separate elements of the process requiring review by more than one discipline, the FDA recommends that the requester submit separate controlled correspondence requests, as this will facilitate timely review and response. So the guidance for industry on controlled correspondence related to generic drug development outlines the type of inquiries handled by each of these review disciplines. At this point, we have a couple challenge questions for your consideration. So challenge question number 1 reads, which of the following does not review controlled correspondences? I'll give us a couple seconds to consider what we think the right answer is. So if you picked A, Division of Quality Management Systems, you are correct. So challenge question number 2 reads, which group reviews the ANDA to determine whether it is substantially complete? If you picked B, Division of Filing Review, you are correct. So on this slide, we've listed some additional resources for you. It includes some helpful guidances as well as a map and the GDUFA2 commitment letter. And on here, we have some of our contact information. So if you have any questions pertaining to controlled correspondences, please send an email to genericdrugs@fda.hhs.gov. Questions on your ANDA filing status can be sent via email to andafiling@fda.hhs.gov. And then Division of Filing Review, DFR rescission requests, or RTR refuse to receive questions can be sent via email to dfrsupervisor@fda.hhs.gov. So just to recap from a controlled correspondence perspective for the Division of Filing Review, the biggest takeaways are that it's important to ensure that your controlled correspondence is submitted in full at the time of initial submission, and then also if you're seeking information on separate elements of the generic drug product development process requiring review by more than one discipline, we ask that you please submit separate requests, as this will facilitate timely review and response. So on behalf of my colleague Bijal and myself, I'd like to thank you all for your time. We'll be back during the panel Q&A session to answer any questions you've submitted. Thank you.